For those of you who don't know, steampunk is kind of the jumping off point in a part of science fiction that assumes technology didn't advance beyond steam power. We never got onto the electrical, we never got onto what modern technology amounts to. And mine takes place just after the Civil War. The Civil War actually kind of comes to a draw and basically to fight zombies. So we're going to pick up with my bad guy as we first meet him. His name is Tom, and I'll just jump right in. The crowds moved along at a pace just slow enough to take in all the sights and sounds of the boardwalk, but just fast enough not to be drawn in by the barkers trying to take their money at the games of chance or freak shows. Colorful balloons and streamers waved from the booths, nudged aloft by the breeze coming off the Pacific. The breeze also carried the underlying oaky aroma of smoke from the vendors that made foodstuff like gingerbread cookies, bread, and other overpriced treats. Thomas Preston moved easily through the people, not allowing himself to be slowed or blocked by the looky-loos. He'd stopped staring at the sights years ago, and the barkers knew they had no chance to gain his interest. From the day Tom had gone to work for Roberto Cantillone, everything had changed. People started treating him differently. They knew the influence and power that Cantillone had, and by extension, they gave it to Tom. They assured that a pillar of the community such as Cantillone would only surround himself with like-minded people. Tom was fine with that. At first, it seemed logical to Tom that Cantillone had to be a criminal mastermind, but it became obvious in the early days that he was just a good guy and made his name and his money by hard work. While Tom admired the ethic, it certainly wasn't his own style. Cantillone was naive and trusting and took Tom at his word on every matter, from his work experience to his family name. It was easy to insinuate himself into the business. He rounded the corner of the last block to the familiar sounds of the steam organ belting out the frog in the well, as it did with infuriating frequency during the day. It was at this corner that the stench of the main boulevard hit Tom every day. The heavy fragrance of the sea air mixed with the accumulated history of the bodily odors of thousands of visitors to the area. Even when there was almost no one there, it seemed the street remembered and spat their smells back out. It was almost as bad as the fragrant dung of the animals that populated Tom's workplace. The sounds of a barker were louder here, amplified by a megaphone to make them heard above everything else on the boardwalk. Tom stopped to take in the spectacle of the business that his boss had constructed there. It wasn't a pathetic wooden stall like everyone else's property. It was an experience. While he wasn't the brightest man when it came to human nature, Cantillone was a natural showman and promoter. He had put together a destination for the people of the West to flock to for entertainment, and he named it after himself, the Cantillone Family Hall of Amazement. He had constructed a small zoo, complete with an elephant, a bear, an alligator. The other animals were one that anyone could encounter in the nearby woods and trails. There was a fox, some raccoons, common birds, and even a dog that one of the workers had picked up as a stray. Cantillone posted a sign on its cage claiming it was a highly sought-after European breed. When people got to the elephant and the major attractions, they generally forgot about their disappointment in the other animals. The sprawling compound included a circus-like big top in the middle of the buildings. Here, his boss acted as ringmaster, introducing acts from clowns and acrobats to dancing cats and trick-shot gunmen. Just a block away from the Hall of Amazement, casting a shadow over the rest of the boardwalk, was the airship tower called Cantillone's launch. He charged passengers a minor pittance for one of his pilots to fly them down the coast for an hour and serve them stale cheese and watered-down drinks. The tower was also the departure point for Cantilloni's cross-country flights. Pilgrims who wanted to head for the east in comfort sat in a spacious lobby and waited in style. That morning, the dirigible Pride and Joy sat moored and ready for the influx of tourists. They could get from point A to point B in almost a month via a turtle and a squalor, or taking an airship to get there comfortably in a week. Luxury cost a bit more, though. At the steps to the Hall of Amazement, Tom looked up at the barker's stand. The man hawking the zoo and the tours was actually his boss, dressed in a colorful topcoat and matching red top hat. It didn't surprise him. It happened a couple of times a week. Cantillone liked to be involved in all areas of his company. Tom nodded and waved, but Cantillone didn't even slow his pitch to acknowledge Tom's presence. Not that Tom minded. He was a little embarrassed by the atmosphere, the day-to-day annex of his company's public persona. Tom walked through the always open doors of the lobby, winking as he passed Janine, the ticket seller, and continued down the hall, plastered with bright posters announcing past and upcoming exhibits. The Ying Sisters of China, the two-headed giraffe, the Belgian plate spinners. In the lobby proper, he strode past the permanent oddities behind the glass, jars with strange fetuses, shrunken heads, There were the innards of strange animals, malformed skeletons, and a large brain preserved in green fluid. He had gotten over their novelty and grotesqueness quickly after he'd begun to work for Cantillone, especially after he found out they were all fake. The door to the main office was blocked by the shabby figure of Kendall Liddy, the company bookkeeper, fumbling with his keys while trying to keep his briefcase under his arm. His shirt was half tucked in and tie hung loose at his neck. "Can I get that door for you?" Tom asked. Kendall was startled but managed to end up with a smile. "Thanks. I'm trying to do too much today, I think." As Kendall stepped back, he dropped the briefcase and a small stack of papers slid out. "Dang, it just isn't my morning." Tom shook his head and unlocked the door. Kendall was a buffoon. He knew his numbers, and he knew that made him useful in many ways. "Brother, you just can't win today, can you?" Kendall looked up and flashed a wicked smile. "No, brother, I just can't." He returned to gathering the files. The man hid a secret like a child. The smile on his face gave away far too much. Tom was beginning to think the idiot would spill his guts if only someone asked him the right questions. The two of them had something in common, which was the only reason Kendall was still around. "How are we doing on that front?" Kendall looked to make sure they were alone and then whispered his response. "Close." "Excellent, let me help you up." Tom extended his hand and pulled. Cantillone came to the hall just as Kendall was back on his feet. "Good to see everyone working so well together." Cantillone twirled his top hat on his index finger as he went. He passed it off to Tom as he moved into his office. "But I don't pay you people to stand around holding hands. Let's get to business." They followed their boss and dropped their things in their respective areas. It was a tight room that housed the small desks of Tom and Kendall. The walls were bare and the single window was dirty and didn't close all the way. Opposite Tom's desk was a door that led to Cantillone's private office, which was adorned much more brightly. The colorful posters of acrobats and a window that extended the length of the wall and offered a view of both the crowds on the boardwalk and the lineup to the air tower. Tom trailed his boss into the inner room to join him for the morning meeting. It was these gatherings that Tom enjoyed. Here they talked about real business matters, leading things like lions and snakes for another time. They ran over the finances, reviewed the previous day's take, and looked at the rest of Cantillone's massive empire. "I think I'm going to have to let Cappy Marks go. He's a horrible barker," Cantillone said. Tom hung the boss's hat on the standard hook by the window. "That's too bad. He's an excellent clown. Crowd favorite." A shiver ran Tom's spine as he thought about what he just said. Even the real meat of the business often involved clowns and wild animals. He watched as his boss hastily moved over to the window and opened it. "Listen," Cantillone said. There was a faint shouting that Tom couldn't distinguish from the rest of the noise. "He's terrible. He's got no banter, no rapport." "Exactly." The image of the lanky man in his full clown makeup and clothes brought a smile to Tom's face. So find somebody else. Let Cappy do what he does best." The room was filled with the sounds of crowds and popping balloons and the faint staccato sound of Cappy trying to draw in the early morning drifters. "I don't know who else we can get." Cantillone rubbed his chin. "We'll work on it. We'll find someone," Tom said. He sat at the small table in the corner and took out his notebook. He made a note that was barely legible about Cappy. He never intended to follow up on it, so it didn't matter what he put as long as it looked good to Cantillone if he ever glanced over. He watched his boss fiddle with his jacket as he sat behind an oversized mahogany desk. "I got a wire that some of our equipment up north just got damaged in a pretty bad rainstorm yesterday. The air tower up there got some lightning strikes that knocked out the guidance lights. We're expecting more weather today." Tom was aware of the situation. He'd had someone actually send the message. "Will they be able to continue the crossings on schedule?" Tom knew very well what sort of condition the airships were in. He had his best people oversee the maintenance. "Nothing launching for the next couple of days up there, but one of our others should be landing this afternoon, hopefully. It may have been set back by the storms, but we'll see what we get today. If it becomes a problem, maybe we can go up there and help out," Tom said. "Not a bad idea. Maybe someone needs to go up there and remind that contingent who they work for." Cantillone stopped as voices came from the outer room. Someone was talking to Kendall, and after a moment there was a knock on the door. "Mr. Cantillone, there's a man here who says you'll want to talk," Kendall said. Tom and his boss exchanged a glance. "Were you expecting someone today?" Cantillone shook his head no. "Well, then I guess you'll have to tell him he's wrong," Tom said. "He's very insistent." Kendall lowered his voice. "And large. Good God, that he shows some backbone and toss him out." Tom saw the reluctance in the accountant's face. "What's his name?" he asked. "He claims his name is Moose," Kendall said.